Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to this webinar on getting published in Coloration Technology. I'm delighted that you've taken time to participate, and I hope you'll find what I have to say useful as authors. My name is Andy Towns. I've been Editor-in-Chief for Coloration Technology for over a year, having spent a decade or so on the journal's editorial panel. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll be doing the talking, and then myself and an editorial colleague, Dr. Catherine Barber, who's the journal's managing editor, will be taking your questions. During the webinar, I aim to demystify the process of getting published in Coloration Technology. I'll be talking specifically about research papers and want to give you an insider's view on what makes a good manuscript for Coloration Technology. I'll provide you with an insight into what the journal's referees are looking for in a paper. I will also be mentioning common shortcomings that authors often make in their submissions and just how you can avoid them. Coloration Technology was originally titled the Journal of the Society of Dyers and Colorists and has been published since the Society was founded in the 19th century. The Society's got a long and illustrious history of promoting the science and technology of colour. The journal forms a key part of that mission. For most of its life, the journal performed many functions for the Society, publishing proceedings of meetings and events, Society bylaws and correspondence, as well as academic papers and reviews. However, at the turn of the millennium, along with the change of name, the journal became completely technically focused, publishing just research papers and reviews. During this time, the journal's editorial panel has grown, has become more international, while the quality and impact of the papers it's published has increased as well. The bulk of papers published are reports of research work, but we're very happy to consider scholarly reviews, so please think of the journal for this too. What sort of things do we publish? Well, I like to think of these as the 3 C's, which means that the content of the journal is very multidisciplinary. The 3 C's is firstly there's colour, from physics to psychology. The second C is colorants, which can include the chemistry of conventional dyes and pigments as well as functional colorants, for example, those used in electronics and energy applications as well as medical uses. The other C, last but not least, is coloration, which can not only include processes for imparting colour to substrates, but also its removal from textiles as well as from effluent as well. If you'd like a complete overview of the journal's scope, I urge you to go to the author guidelines page on the journal's website or follow the web address on the slide. Failing that, just ask us, the editorial staff. We'll be very happy to give you advice and guidance on the subject. So why publish in Coloration Technology? The journal's distributed globally. It's widely recognized throughout the world as one of the leading colour-related journals, so your work will readily reach your intended audience. As I've mentioned, the journal's got the backing of a world-leading colour society in the SDC. Not only that, it's resourced by a world leader in academic publishing in Wiley. As a consequence, Coloration Technology's got a great online presence. The website's terrific, enabling prospective readers of your papers ready access to them. In addition, your papers will be published online well before they appear in print through the site's early view facility, allowing readers access to your work more rapidly than would be normal. In addition, all published papers are automatically considered for annual awards. They can be selected as a feature article. One of these is selected per issue. They appear at the front of the print issue and are printed in full colour at no extra cost to the authors. Coloration Technology has also got a scheme, the Accelerated Publication Protocol, to enable authors of shorter papers to publish their papers even more rapidly. There are specific criteria on these, such as article length and the number of figures in the paper, etc. But if this looks to be of interest to you, please visit the website or go to the address on the slide. What I'll do in the rest of this webinar is take you through how submissions to Coloration Technology are processed to give you a better idea of what goes on. I'll pay particular attention to how papers are assessed. You'll be able to see exactly what questions we ask the referees. Also, I'll be covering the sorts of shortcomings that referees often pick up on. What happens during the submission process? I'm going to assume here that the authors have written up their research according to the author guidelines and have submitted it to the editorial office by the Scholar One website. What happens next is the manuscript is screened before it's sent out for peer review. It's checked for relevance and general quality, and also by the journal's anti-plagiarism software tool called Authenticate. This can detect if authors have copied text from their own previous published papers or those of others. Assuming there's no problems, once the submission has been given the all clear for peer review, we look for 2 to 3 detailed expert opinions from members of our editorial board or our pool of referees. The referees are asked questions on various aspects of the manuscript, which I'll come on to, but they're also requested to give a recommendation on the decision to publish. These options range from acceptance following relatively minor amendments to rejection. If we get cases where referees disagree, we may seek further adjudication from yet another referee. So in some instances, 4 experts may have been consulted on a particular paper. We don't take decisions lightly. One of the options includes redaction with an invitation for resubmission, where we feel that a substantial rewrite of the manuscript, perhaps the inclusion of substantial amount of extra work, would be worthy of being reconsidered for publication. As I mentioned earlier, we ask referees detailed questions on different aspects of the submission, as well as for their overall opinion and for a recommendation. We also ask them in confidence if they feel there's anything suspicious about the submission, for example, if they've got some concerns about the data presented. But irrespective of the ultimate decision to publish, the authors are fed back all the non-confidential referees' comments. I feel it's a real strength of the journal because it allows authors to see how expert peers feel about their work. I can think of several really strong papers that have appeared in Coloration Technology in recent years where value has been added to the paper because the authors have acted upon the referees' comments and suggestions. One thing that authors can do to help us to help them is to provide meaningful keywords for their manuscript. This will help the editorial staff in choosing appropriate referees, which in turn will help expedite the review process. However, try and keep them as relevant and specific as you can, that there's no point in using simply general terms like pigment or dyeing. Now on to the nuts and bolts of the review process. The first request made to our referees is for an overall opinion on the manuscript. You can see the actual wording of the question in the rectangle on the screen. Special emphasis on novelty, impact, and technical soundness is made, so make sure you sell your research to readers of your paper. Leave the referees in no doubt as to why it's original, why it constitutes an advance in current knowledge, as well as what problems have been solved during the research or because of the research. Referees who are left unimpressed because the authors haven't made these points clear are less likely to be positive about the paper. However, don't make the mistake of putting forward claims that are not justified by evidence. Think about every conclusion and claim that you make. Is it backed up by our data? Referees will pick up on this if it isn't. The second aspect that we ask referees to consider is the paper's abstract. Again, you can see the exact question in the box on screen. The abstract is usually the first contact a reader or referee has with a paper, and sometimes the only one. Make sure it's therefore clear, accurate and concise picture of your paper. For Coloration Technology, you've just got 250 words to enable potential readers to decide whether to read on or not. Don't make the mistake of describing what you did without summarizing your main findings too. Also, include key terms so that readers looking for papers on your subject will find your paper. Many search engines use the abstract to do so. A common error for authors is to fail to write the abstract as a standalone piece of text. Don't include, for example, compound reference numbers, which are only given in the main body of the paper. A similar rule applies for acronyms as well, which you've defined in the main body of the paper, but don't make a lot of sense when read in isolation in the abstract. Next, referees are requested to look in detail at the introduction section. For this reason, use it to spell out clearly why you've undertaken the research, along with the specific aims of the work. Ensure the referees understand the importance of the purpose of what you've done. Obviously, you should provide background information to make your case, but make sure all of it is relevant. Referees don't like waffle. In addition, bear in mind that the readership will be broadly familiar with colour and colorants, so there's no need to go into the fundamentals. For example, the very basics of azochemistry or simple colour physics. Choose your references with care. Try to use recent reviews for general points rather than research papers, unless you are referencing that work specifically. Only cite your own work when appropriate. Referees don't take kindly to it when they think that you're self-citing gratuitously. The next section that the referees consider is the experimental. Referees are asked whether authors have provided enough detail for an expert to replicate the work, so make sure that you do. It's surprising how many papers fall down on this by neglecting to include simple things such as quantities of all the reagents used. Authors sometimes render their experimental results meaningless by omitting all important test conditions, for example, fastness test protocols. Something else of particular concern is the characterization of any novel dyes, pigments or intermediates in manuscripts. Authors often provide really good spectroscopic evidence for compound identity, but they don't prove conclusively that they've obtained their products in a pure state. If they fail to show that the materials are free from organic or inorganic contaminants, for example by elemental analysis, then referees are liable to find the findings that they've made with those particular compounds. They might treat them with some real caution because the authors haven't conclusively proved that they're using pure materials. When it comes to presenting and discussing your results, impress the referees with clear presentation of your results and a meaningful discussion of them. Don't be tempted to squeeze too much data onto a chart. Don't just describe data, but enlighten the reader about its significance. One common failing of authors is that they present and discuss their results in complete isolation from previous theoretical or practical findings on the particular subject. For example, in previous research papers. You'll find it difficult to convince a referee that your work is worthy of publication if you do that, so ensure you put your data into context. For example, if you've developed a great new type of yellow colorant for a particular substrate, show how it's better by direct comparison to existing commercial yellow colorants for those substrates. As I mentioned before, make sure you back up all of your claims with evidence and summarize them in the conclusion section. For example, don't conclude a paper on, say, the application of a new type of dye for cotton with a claim that dyings of excellent levelness were produced when this is the first time you mention levelness at all in a paper. It happens surprisingly often. And finally, last but not least, referees are asked to consider the standard of English. While obviously allowances are made for the fact that most submissions to Coloration Technology are written by authors for whom English is not the native tongue, it is surprising that I'm surprised by the number of papers where the authors haven't even bothered to use the spell checking function on the word processor. If a referee can sense that, if not enough care has been taken about a manuscript, then they may have doubts about the work that the paper describes itself. For the same reasons, check that your references have been cited correctly and that they're appropriate and balanced, because the referees will be asked to check this too. Another thing that referees are often concerned about is repetition of the number of figures and graphs in a paper. Ask yourself whether every chart is really necessary. Do certain graphs merely present the same data in different ways? Do all of the text and diagrams add something to the paper, or are there elements of them that could be omitted from the paper without making any significant difference to it? I really hope that you feel what I've been saying has been useful. There are plenty of other resources out there on how to get published. For example, I can warmly recommend the Author Services web page on Wiley Blackwell's website. It doesn't only provide good general advice, but it also links to other useful resources. For example, it lists books on how to write research papers. There are also specific resources on Coloration Technology's website, as well as the SDC site. The editorial staff, including myself, are happy to provide advice and general guidance should you seek it. I hope you found this webinar a useful resource too, and we look forward to reading your next submission to us.
If you'd like to get in touch with the SDC or the editorial staff at Coloration Technology, you're more than welcome to use the contact details on screen now. That concludes the presentation section of the webinar. Now we'll be moving on to the Q&A, the question and answer session of this webinar. I'll be tackling the questions along with Catherine. If you haven't sent a question in yet and you'd like to do so, please feel free using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Thanks to those of you who've already sent questions in. I'll move on to the first one. This is, can I have more details on the accelerated publication protocol? This is something I mentioned fairly early on into the webinar, where there are, which is to cater for shorter communications and is intended to give authors the opportunity to publish papers more rapidly than a full paper. Catherine's better placed to be able to tell you the exact criteria behind that, so I'll just hand over to Catherine now.
Thanks, Andy. So the accelerated publication procedure is something that we have recently reintroduced for Coloration Technology, and as Andy mentioned, it's in place for short communications that require very little in the way of revisions or editing, with the aim to have these papers published online faster than regular papers would be. And there are some specific guidelines regarding the length of articles that can be submitted for this procedure, and these are laid out in the document that's linked to from the journal's homepage and also in the presentation that you've just seen. But specifically, articles should be no longer than 2,500 words. This excludes references and should contain no more than a total of 9 tables, figures and schemes. So if you wish to submit an article for this procedure, you will have the option to do so when you submit through the Scholar One system. You can select short communication, and this will allow you to submit through this procedure.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Another question. I like this one. It says, the referees are experts, but it's safer to assume that they know but is it safer to assume they know very little in order that the paper text is clear and fully understandable? What level of reader expertise should an author assume? I think when you're writing a paper, it's important that you think of your audience as one who is a kind of at the level of graduate students of the subject of the paper, or those who've got very good practical experience in that particular field. So you don't need to go right down to the very basics, but in, say, for example, in the introduction, it'd be well worthwhile including key references in the subject area, so that if there's a relative newcomer to the field, then they can very quickly go to the literature references that you've cited, which provide background to the field, and they can, if need be, get themselves up to speed and then be able to read and understand your paper more readily. If you're in any doubt, really, as to what level you should be pitching yourself at, a good thing to do is to take a look at previously published papers in Coloration Technology and read through them, and by doing so, you'll get a good feel for the nature and style of what you need to be writing. Okay, another question. Are you happy to publish on natural dyes as well as synthetic dyes? And are your referees capable of covering this subject? The answer to that is yes. We're happy to consider research papers on the constitution and application of natural dyes. It's something that the journal's published on over the last few years. And we do have, we're very lucky to count on the expertise within our editorial panel. We've got a number of experts who have worked within the field of natural dyes and published papers on them. So the answer is yes. We're happy to consider natural dye submissions. If you do write a paper on natural dyes, It's as well things that referees pick up on those sorts of papers are it's characterization of the natural dye substance you're using. You've also got to consider how you're applying those dyes, because one common failing of papers is that the authors have extracted natural dye and characterized it, but then they've applied it to a fibre with mordants that wouldn't be considered environmentally acceptable. So all the potential benefits for natural dye are negated by the fact that they're having to use large concentrations of heavy metal salts, which will be unacceptable in terms of effluent discharge. Next question, we've got, what are the criteria for referees and how are they selected? As we've mentioned before in the webinar, keywords are one way of flagging up who would be, the area with which the paper's involved, and therefore it's good for addressing who might be suitable to referee. But I think as Catherine's close to this process, I'll hand the question over to her.
Okay. Whenever a author signs up to the submission system, they're automatically given the opportunity to also act as a referee. So when you put your keywords in when you register, these will be used as keywords as a referee as well. Authors are able to suggest referees that may be able to look at their manuscript. So these are sometimes used. They would be used in combination with referees that we've secured ourselves, rather than just referees that an author has suggested. I tend to go on keywords. Sorry. I tend to use the keywords, but I also will use kind of Google searching and looking at various departments to select referees that I think are appropriate from reading the abstract and the introduction and looking through the manuscript.
Yeah, I mean, if I could jump in as well here, Catherine.
Yep.
One of the great things about the journal is it's backed by the SDC, and there's lots of expertise within the society. So, if need be, we can also use the society as a resource as well to try to secure expertise for a particular paper if it's not something that we commonly have to deal with. I mean, as I've mentioned before, Coloration Technology it publishes on a very wide area of subjects, which is sometimes difficult to cover. But for example, in the SDC, there is a good depth of knowledge and the capability of finding suitable expertise if we need to. Okay, another question. Somebody's asked about feature articles, something I mentioned earlier on the webinar. What are the key points to get an article to be a featured one? There's one article chosen each issue to be a featured article, and the two key things really in the choice are the impact of the paper. Is the research presented, does it represent a significant advance in existing knowledge, or does it bring something new to the table in terms of technology or chemistry? And the second aspect is one of quality. So it's going to be extremely well presented and rounded, and the authors who have conducted the research have thought deeply about what they've been doing and have been able to come up with a really good picture of what they've done and covered all the angles on their work as well. Got another question on keywords here. Keywords are vital for choosing referees. Could this be abused to steer selection of the referees? I kind of feel that this question isn't particularly relevant, because authors, as part of the submission process, are very welcome to nominate preferred referees for their paper. So if they feel that they're particular experts in their field that they would like, if possible, to review their paper, then they can put those names forward for consideration. Similarly, if they don't feel that they'll get a fair crack of the whip from other experts in the field, then they're also free to put forward names for non-preferred referees as well, if they should also do so, and that's something we would consider acting upon. Another question, are referees less positive generally when clarity in the text is lacking? And do you have any tips on making your text clearer? The answer to that is yes on both counts. If you can present your ideas and your research clearly, there'll be less effort needed for a referee to understand it and to appreciate it. If they're having to fight through some very tangled arguments, or there are bits missing to the way the research is presented, or the arguments discussing the results aren't particularly clear, then that's going to make the process of a referee evaluating the manuscript more difficult, and then, yes, there will be maybe less positive about it. How can you remedy that? How can you make your text clearer? Well, one very good idea is to get your colleagues to read it. Somebody perhaps who hasn't been directly involved with the research, obviously the writing of the manuscript, if you can persuade them to look at the manuscript and give you some constructive advice on it before you then submit it, I think that would be a very good thing to do. We've just had a question in on, do you publish on historical research leading to new info or only on modern current applications? We're open to historical research, yes, as in papers that frame new perspectives on how the colour research has been undertaken in the past. Yeah, definitely. We don't just focus on modern current applications, although that's what our focus is on. For example, we've published a paper not so long back for the centenary of Perkins' anniversary of the discovery of mauve 150 years ago, not a centenary, 150 years ago, where we had a very good paper published on Perkins' life and work. And we have also had papers published in the past which have reviewed the history of synthetic colorants as well, going all the way back to the mid-18th century, how they've developed and come to replace natural dyes, and so on. So the answer to that is yes. I mean, if I can just go on a tangent and discuss reviews in general, the journal is very happy to consider reviews on scholarly subjects. We're very open to suggestions from authors for topics. Now, that may be on subjects on which the journal hasn't published a review before, but equally, we're also very open to suggestions for review subjects where they have appeared in the journal in the past, say 10 years ago or 15 years ago or maybe even longer, and there's a good reason for an updating of a review to get a fresh perspective on a subject. Somebody's written in asking, can I clarify what I meant when I said authors self-cited gratuitously? That purely refers to when authors include references to their own work which aren't really relevant to what the paper is actually about. They've just kind of used it as an excuse to refer to their own work, and that's something that referees often tend to pick up on if they feel that those cited references don't really have anything to do with the paper. We've got another question on, this is to do with spell checking. Been asked the question, should we use the English UK version of a spell checker rather than a US English one? I mean, in an ideal world, to make things easier for us and for the wider production staff, then using a UK English version of a spell checker would be the best possible solution. But if that's not available to you, and it means that you check your work through automatically, then a US spell check will be okay, yes. Let's have a look. We've got one more question here, last question. It says, I know you've published special issues on lighting and also published a green special as well. These were published over the last couple of years. Is this something you plan to do more of? The special issues that CT has put out have been successful. The lighting issue, the papers in the lighting issue have done especially well in terms of citation, so it's something we would like to do more of. The key behind this really is identifying particular subjects that could fill an issue, and also identifying a suitable guest editor who can pull together all of these papers and get them out on time. So we're very open to ideas. If this is something that would be of interest to you, then please get in touch. I think it's probably time to wrap it up now, so I'll conclude the webinar. Thanks again for your questions. We're very grateful to Workcast for organising such a smoothly running webinar, and also to the staff of the SDC and Wiley for their input. Thank you very much also for taking the time to participate in the webinar. We really hope it's been useful to you. Thank you and goodbye.